Welcome to the Navigator podcast. Hello and welcome to the Navigate Academy. Today's podcast is with Module 26, Problem Solving. Our guest today is Joel Harris, who, in addition to being one of Navigate's principal consultants, is also the recently hired President of Solutions360. So congratulations, Joel.
Thank you.
Joel's an experienced executive across multiple industries with extensive experience building, managing, leading, and growing low voltage companies from audiovisual to security to structured cabling to specialty healthcare. He's served as COO and CEO roles for the past 20 years, and in this role has led multiple successful acquisitions ranging from small companies to large strategic ventures. With this experience, he is adding a strategic and financial richness to our companies, which is already positively impacting several of our clients. Joel, this session again is focused on problem solving, something you've encountered many times thus far in your experience. So what are the common challenges that you see companies having when they have, again, problems that they need to be solved, but also kind of what's the mindset or challenge you see when people have them?
I think the biggest factor to overcome in problem solving is letting go of our past history and experience that we think we know what the answer is before we attack the problem. So we all come to the table to discuss the problem with a perspective or a point of view that's already been hardened. And a lot of times we can't let ourselves open ourselves up to really understanding what the problem is. We see this with our customers. When customers approach our colleagues with problems, we define them into the problem that we think they're asking. So the hardest part is for us to do two things. One is to not answer the question we think they're asking, but to really get to the real question, like define the problem better. And then number two, let go of what we think the answer is long enough to listen to what the real problem is. Then we can bring better problem solving techniques to address the real issue at hand.
Well, and I fully agree that there's this saying, you know, if you're a carpenter, everything looks like a nail.
That's right.
Yeah. And what I find also is that part of the, even entering the problem conversation is I find that we have to have patience. And like you said, we come with that preconceived answer because we think that quick has to be better. And that quote, I solved it. And so finding that easy answer, and again, the having patience. What are your thoughts continuing that conversation? Again, not looking at things through the lens of this is the answer I've always given, but what are some other facets that people really need to bring to bear?
Let go of the people, right? So often we see the problem with the face of a person on it, and we have to let go of that tendency to blame a person for the problem, and that person becomes the root of all the problems, right? So we have to let go of the personal aspect of it. So there is the patience, and there's also letting go of the people aspect. So we try to make the problem not about the person, but about the problem. And then we can free up our brains again to actually work on the real problem.
Well, and in so many of the organizations in this industry, the people who are working within a process have been in it, quote, forever. So it must be them. So I think it's also separate, as you're saying, separate the person from the problem, but also separate the person from thinking that they built the process and the problem to begin with. Many of them inherited it. And, you know, I always have the saying, if you're a fish in water, you don't know that water exists. So it's being able to pull that fish out and go, what's really the real reality?
You make a great point, because of the people on both sides of it, right? So blaming the person for something that's not really their problem, or wishing that the person could see outside their own environment. And we've never trained them. We've never given them the experience to look outside their own environment. So of course, they're only going to come back with their own experience into that problem.
I also believe that problems need to be solved by a small group. Large groups tend to get in the way of one another, but a small group of committed individuals who are that searching for the root cause. And they also need to leave their ego at the door. Where have you seen your experience in terms of either egos or people who show up to say, I am the answer person, or this collective mass movement what have you found to be like the best problem solving kind of formula in terms of just the structure of it?
Well, as you know, in Lean Sigma, it's go to the mountain, right? Go to the root of the problem, go to the place where the problem exists and get the people who actually are involved in that problem to work on the problem. Often we bring in executives who did that work 30 years ago, and they have a belief about how that work is done. And we put the wrong people in trying to solve the problem because they're not even solving the problem that's in the works today. So go to the mountain, go to the problem itself and get the people involved who are actually involved in working on that problem. And as you said, it can't be consensus, and it can't be based on titles, and it can't be based on who thinks they're the biggest brain in the room. It has to be based on the people who actually have to live with the solution once the problem has been solved. Make it small, make it contained, give them a reasonable path to resolution, and let them come up with a resolution to it. So I find as an executive, it's more about defining the path to resolution and helping people along the path. Because if all I do is step in and solve the problem for everybody, well, they don't really believe in the solution anyway. And secondly, it's probably not the best answer we're going to get.
Well, and for a whole bunch of reasons, they're not bought, as we use the term bought in. They're not bought into the solution because it wasn't there. And oftentimes it wasn't the problem anyway.
It's often, I'm amazed how much I learn. I think I really know my companies, and then I go and find that no, the person who's doing the task on a daily basis knows way more about this problem than I do from whatever perspective I've been sitting at it, looking at it from the lens of an executive. I'm probably pretty better at seeing the problems, but I'm way worse at understanding why those problems exist. Exactly. And how to solve them.
Well, and I think just from your experience and my experience also, I mean, age does give us that, and hopefully it's good experience. But it's taken the time to understand the true data versus just looking for the data that already gives us, proves that, yeah, I have to be right. Why? Because this is the data. No, it's only the data you looked for. It wasn't the truth.
Well, there is the age-old problem of confirmation bias, and it exists in all of our lives, personal and professional, right? We look for data that supports our point of view. It's the rare person who's able to look at data objectively and say, hey, that data contradicts my point of view. I'd better pay attention to it.
Yeah. What mindset, again, and then we've talked a little bit about it already, does an executive need of an organization to really allow good, mature problem solving to occur?
Number one, most of us have gotten to where we are because we're really great problem solvers. And so we tend to solve the problems for the organization instead of teach people how to solve problems and then create them a path towards resolution. So one of the things I always try to do, and I'm not sure this is the best methodology, but I try to help people solve the problem themselves, but not leave them feeling alone or that I've abandoned them in the process. So try to understand what your team can solve too, right? What's the next iteration of the problem solving? Get them to that point, guide them through the path of it, and be a guide to the problem solving rather than the problem solver. And teach people how to think about the problem. I can give them an answer, but it's almost always wrong because the context was wrong. So what I want to teach people is how to think about the problem so that when I'm not in the room, they're using how I think about problem solving to solve the next problem that I'm not present to solve for them. So it's teaching them how to think about problem solving rather than solving the problem, but also not giving them, being the person, enough of an adult in the room to give them problems they can solve, cheering them on to victory when they solve it, and then allowing them to progressively solve larger, more complex problems.
Well, and I think as we use the word solve, it's really coming up with criteria and decisions. And oftentimes the team doesn't have the authority to decide, but man, they brought up the solutions that will work. And I think a lot of people collapse the two. Well, I can't solve it because I don't have authority. Well, you have the authority to come up with great solutions that then the executives need to trust you on, and they can make that decision.
That's a really great point. All too often, the team wants unilateral authority when they don't really understand the implications of the solutions they may be bringing. The executives have the authority, and they can understand the implications, but they don't really have all the right possible scenarios to solve it. So bring those two together.
Yep. I'm sure we can go through horror stories or good stories, but give me, whichever example you want, whichever side of the coin you want, like
That's right.
a positive one or a negative one, just to kind of go, yeah, I could see that. Any in your past that you've run into is like going, ooh, I didn't set that one up right.
I think maybe this is a little off tangent, but I think the thing that most of us as executives face is we feel like we're solving the same problem over and over again. So where I really pull my hair out metaphorically is
Thanks.
when
I did do that to me.
is when I feel like I'm solving the same problem. And what that means is I didn't really make sure that the solution stuck, right? It didn't get ingrained, it didn't turn into a habit, it didn't become embedded into the process. So probably the worst type of problem solving is solving it one time and then keep solving it over and over again because you didn't put in the process behind it or the ability for it to actually stick. You put a Band-Aid on it essentially, but it didn't stick.
Right. We didn't change the habit, which changed the root cause.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that truly is creating a new paradigm. And again, I think people strive for the answer, but not the hard work it takes to implement the answer in the new state of being. So great point.
And you see people do this all the time. They see a data point and they go try to solve that data point instead of looking at the systematic behavior that caused that outcome to happen. And so you can solve that, but by putting the rules in to solve that one unique problem, you've now created 5 other problems that you didn't anticipate because in solving that one. So be thoughtful about the problems you're solving as opposed to just seeing an issue and rushing in to list a new policy, a new process, a new procedure that will take care of that one exception, but harm the rest of the other day-to-day work that you're doing.
Great. I know the book for this module is the QBQ, which you get a great book.
I love that question.
Let's differentiate it and let's make it personal, but let's not hold the person to it. And again, how does that impact me? Any other books you've been reading that kind of made a difference for you?
So recently, I had to pull it up here. Recently, I've been reading Pema Chodron's book on, get the title here. Sorry, I know I'm looking down. When Things Fall Apart. And it's a book about the practice of Buddhism. And what's interesting for me, and it correlates to this idea of problem solving, is being intentional and being mindful. And so often in problem, again, we started this conversation with, we often just bring our known solutions to the problems we face. And if our personal life and our professional life, we can just be aware and then be mindful, a lot of the problems that we're facing diminish in size and in scope and become easier for us to solve. So it was an interesting question for you to ask me, what am I reading for growth? Because it actually correlates nicely with this idea of problem solving.
Great.
And how we think about it.
Well, again, thank you. And congrats on your new role. Again, I'm working with you in a whole bunch of different roles too.
A whole bunch of different roles. We're crossing paths everywhere, and it's my privilege and true joy in life. Thank you.
You're welcome.